before people celebrated Christmas, Kwanzaa, Hanukkah, until about 200 BCE, or Monkey Day, people who weren't Jewish and wanted something to do in December had to do something else. In approximately 500 BCE to 400 AD, people celebrated what is sometimes called the Roman Christmas, and probably the most recognized Roman holiday. My name is Nate, and welcome to Dropout History. And today, I'm going to tell you about Saturnalia and how it may or may not have anything to do with the Christian holiday Christmas. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video and explore your curiosity. I hope that you can learn something. With that being said, I'd like to say that I am not a credible source of information. I'm a college dropout who's done a little bit of research, and I'm stringing together a narrative about something that I like. I hope this can be a good starting point for you to start your pursuit of knowledge, but I am not an expert. Thanks for listening. I really hope you enjoy the video. Hi again. Before we really get into this, I'd like to clarify something. If you're somewhat familiar with Saturnalia and I share some information that you haven't heard or is contradictory to what you have heard, don't jump to the conclusion that either of us is wrong, or really that either of us is right for that matter. All Saturnalia information that we have is pieced together from various sources, and those sources span almost 1,000 years. And the Roman Empire was so vast that it's safe to assume that traditions could have been different regionally, and it could have just changed over the years. Okay, here we go for real now. Yo, Saturnalia! Right off the bat, let's get right into it. Is Saturnalia Roman Christmas? Hold your horses. I'll get to that. What is Saturnalia? Starting in 497 BCE, Saturnalia was a Roman holiday that was meant to honor Saturn, who was a god of, among many other things, agriculture. Some historians believe that it evolved from an agricultural festival celebrating the winter solstice. There's also talk that it had an origin in Roman mythology. By those accounts, Saturnalia is a time to harken back to a golden age where there was no private property or social hierarchy. Where have I heard that before? So, to celebrate the most peaceful time of legend, you pretend to treat people like human beings on an annual basis. Originally, it would occur on one day, December 17th, eventually becoming a week-long celebration. However, in about 49 BC, Julius Caesar changed the calendar. Prior to this change, the calendar was basically a lunar calendar where every so often they realized that the seasons didn't line up correctly, so they would add an extra month. Caesar switched us from using lunar months for time measurement to using solar years. Also, a little side note, back in ancient times, they had a different way of counting what year it was. They weren't just counting backwards to the year that we would count as 1 AD. Throughout the years, it would get celebrated as 3 days, 5 days, 7 days, and then sometime between 37 to 41 AD, Caligula made it 5 days officially. So what was Saturnalia about? Saturnalia was a holiday that was about honoring Saturn and challenging the social norms. On the surface. The celebration was a time to kick back, relax, exchange gifts, and do some debauchery. Yo Saturnalia was the typical greeting, and during the festival, no business was allowed to be conducted. And public gambling, intoxication, and nudity was made legal. Saturnalia would start publicly at the Temple of Saturn. Wool cloths that would normally decorate the feet of the statue of Saturn would be removed, as well as head coverings of religious officials, and animals would be sacrificed. At the home, each household would choose a leader of Saturnalia, sometimes called a king or lord of chaos or misrule. This would usually be a household member of lower status, like a child, and they would lead the festivities. And now, a word from our sponsor.
Hey there, hi there. Welcome to Evan's Jar Emporium, where I got a whole selection of jars. We got big jars.
We got jars with nothing in them.
We got jars for your grandma.
We got jars for cheese, jars for peppers.
We got jars for your mama. Located on 2nd Street and Charleston Street. Once we get this baby up and running, we do free delivery.
Hey, get that out of the shot!
Evan's Jar Emporium at a 2nd and Charles parking lot near you, patent pending.
At Enjoy Emporium, we sell jars for ya.
We got jars from space.
Wow, wonderful stuff. The most famous aspect of Saturnalia is one that I've been saving for last. In accordance with the notion of disregarding the normal social structure, during the festival, masters were to serve their slaves. Their what? For most people, the most infamous era of slavery is that of American slavery. However, the practice of slavery is as old as human civilization itself, and in many ways still exists. Roman culture was no exception. In fact, ancient Roman society was extremely dependent on slavery. At the height of American slavery, 12% of the American population were slaves, whereas in Rome, that number is estimated to be as high as 40%. This seems like a good moment to point something out in case you weren't already aware. Roman history, and most history for that matter, is written from the perspective of the top people of society. So we're not hearing from the slaves, we're hearing from the slave owners. There are instances of this role reversal not being held true. Historians believe that in most cases, if a slave was lucky, they were treated as an equal. Festival was also, among many other things, a way to uphold the Roman hierarchy. By providing an annual brief period of relief for a large, frustrated section of the population, they could alleviate some of the tension.
By providing an annual brief period of relief for a large, frustrated section of the population, they could alleviate some of the tension that had existed in that hierarchy.
Stupid toga. Now, how does this relate to Christmas? Though Christmas has become an increasingly commercial and, dare I even say, secular holiday over the last 200 years, it certainly has its roots in Christianity.
So during the Roman Empire, a Jewish man named Jesus of Nazareth was born. Some people believed he was the son of the one and true God.
Whether or not that was the case, the message that he was spreading was a big threat to the Roman status quo.
Get it? That's Latin.
So they did what they would do to most people who were threatening the status quo. Crucify him. Then some stuff happened that varies depending on your theology, so I'll just leave it at that. Essentially, after that, a sect of Jewish people claimed themselves as Christians, and Christianity was born. Thanks to a widely universal language throughout the Roman Empire, as well as not being as strict as Judaism, it spread. At first, Christians were persecuted in Rome, but in 313
AD,
Christianity was made legal to practice, and by 380 it was made the official religion of the Roman Empire. Since at least the 4th century, Christmas has been celebrated, which coincided with when Saturnalia kind of stopped being celebrated widely. So did Christians hijack Saturnalia, or are they two completely separate December holidays that happen to rise and fall at the same point in history? The answer to all of that is yes, depending on who you ask. There are two leading theories, and much like with other seemingly conflicting information about ancient culture,
it's not outrageous to think that they're both right.
The first theory is what most people probably assume: Christianization, sometimes called the history of religion. This theory is pretty straightforward, and leads us to believe that it happened something like this. Christmas is pretty cool, huh? I thought we were celebrating Saturnalia. No, we're celebrating Christmas. Huh, Christmas is pretty cool. Now, this is pretty easy to believe because Christians kind of have a history of doing that, and most of the time with a healthy dose of authority.
But while there are plenty
We have pieces of evidence of officials saying, hey, do that Christianization thing to other things throughout history, that isn't really the case for Saturnalia.
the only
I think even close to that is one singular source from the 4th century that's referring to a holiday that's on December 25th that's completely separate from Saturnalia, called Sol Invictus. This leads us to our other popular theory, the calculation theory.
To understand the calculation theory, we need to have a look at some dates that hold significance beyond secular history.
Time to talk about theology. Though December 25th is celebrated by Christians as the birth of Jesus, there's no Christian scripture claiming that to be the day of his birth. To determine this date, math is done using some important dates to the Christian religion. To illustrate this, I've derived this advanced equation. To determine Jesus' birth, they added 9 months from his conception. But how do we determine this conception date? The scripture doesn't give a date for that either. Well, it's believed that Jesus was crucified on the same calendar day as his conception, and depending on what sources you're referred to, that date is either March 25th, the spring equinox, or April 6th. And since every single pregnancy ever lasts exactly 9 months, Jesus' birth can be estimated to be December 25th, or sometimes January 6th or 7th, which is when Christmas is sometimes celebrated by other Christians around the world.
Does that mean that Christmas was completely independent of Roman holidays like Saturnalia, or that they stole it?
Well, as I alluded to earlier, I think both. With the research that I've done in conjunction with the theories that I've seen, I've come to believe an amalgamation of these ideas. As Christianity was in its early days in the Roman Empire, it wasn't the only fledgling underground religion. In fact, its arch nemesis religion for some time was the cult of Mithras, the religion behind Sol Invictus.
And Sol Invictus was gaining legitimacy thanks to Aurelian.
I think it's very possible that Christians chose December 25th due to the calculation theory, and then that same date was chosen for Sol Invictus, an attempt to Romanize Christmas. Then Christianity continued to spread and eventually take over the Roman Empire. Then perhaps these Roman holidays were then Christianized in return. Though Saturnalia didn't exemplify these sentiments in practice, one thing that we should take away from Saturnalia is that questioning norms is essential and should be the focus of your Saturnalia. Thank you all for watching, and if there's anything you want to know the history to, please let me know, and I might make a video about it.
Yo Saturnalia and happy holidays.